So I don't know if you saw that exchange, Sammy. It is some pretty bad news for fans of the Chicago Bears. The Honey Bears will not be making a return. The words from George McCaskey himself. Yes, superfan Maddie was at a Bears training camp today. I saw this on Twitter. She took a photo, and at first I thought she was asking him about honey badger. I'm like, what? Honey bears. The cheerleaders. The Bears used to have cheerleaders. For anybody who doesn't understand this, the Bears used to have cheerleaders, and they have not been around for quite some time. I think it is the McCaskey family. And George was asked point blank, are they ever coming back? He's like, no. Nope. It is not even, it was like Luka Doncic just denying the fact that he took the Ozempic shot on the Today Show earlier. He was like, nope, that's not coming back. We're never, at least not in my lifetime. So I don't know. We'll have to move on without it. And you know what? Let's just move on. Sammy, let's start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ryne.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Wednesday night. You know what that means? It is time for Take It to the Rank as we sit here and talk about the Chicago Bears and everything that's been going on in training camp. Greg Braggs will be joining us here in just a matter of moments. But before we get to him, I want to remind you the challenge starts now. Like it starts in about an hour, and I'm in a place where I don't have my DVR because I usually DVR it because it's on at a weird time here on the West Coast, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it. I'm going to fall behind. Our guy Derek, who is a huge Bears fan, is going to be on, and he's going to be talking about that. But AEW is also a lot of cool stuff going on. So appreciate you joining us here this evening as we talk about the Chicago Bears. Before I bring Greg on, you know what? Why don't we do it from CHGO? Our guy who has been at training camp over the last couple of days, doing a great job of giving us some coverage from there. Although a few of the Bears accounts have been stiffing him, have not been saying hello. What is up? Who has not been saying hello, Greg?
Well, I mean, you know how Bears Twitter is. There's newcomers every year or new influencers every year, and so our community grows, and the people that make an effect and a ripple effect in our community, are welcome. They're welcome, but I don't know if they all completely understand the guidelines. And Poles is him, is all off season's been breaking all this news, doing all this stuff. I even gave him a shout out when the Bears hired Ben Johnson, but I guess those things aren't enough for a simple hello when we're sitting in the same bleachers, and that's hurtful. I always try to make myself available to everyone that we see at training camp. I can remember the days back in Bourbonnais where like 12 of us, I have a great picture of 12 separate people that came from all these different parts of the country, different Bears Twitter influencers. We all took a picture, and some of them are still around doing their thing. Others have moved on to, their lives. And you look back on those memories fondly, but, the kids are cold-blooded. That's really what this comes down to.
Oh, they are. It's a dog-eat-dog world now, and all us boomers are being pushed aside. It's fine, and it's only going to get worse as the team continues to get better because people will show up out of the woodwork. I've talked about this at great length. Like whenever I sit here and I think about this, like the Tom Grossi, who we love Tom Grossi, and he got to call Tom Grossi is a great guy, and we love him. But I'm like, you know what? Because the Packers have no fans, he gets to read the Bears draft pick or the Packers draft pick, like their second round pick or something, like, hey, whatever. For us, we're never gonna be more popular than Seth Rollins. We're never gonna be more popular than the dude from the Hot Ones, Jeff Garland, Vince Vaughn. We're so far down the list. Like if we were Jags fans, we would probably be making draft picks.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so, fortunately for Packers fans, they don't have anyone famous that roots for their team. And I'm sure for them that brings them a lot of comfort. But for us, we got to get in line, and that's fine, because I thought Seth Rollins did a fantastic job. And, as he would, as the guy that is very, just knows how to get it done in front of an audience and rile people up. That's what he specializes in. So, shout out to him. But the Packers, they don't have any, famous wrestlers out there that can do that. They don't. I mean, so maybe if Doink the Clown was still around, but he's not, I don't know if he is. I don't think he's a Packer fan.
No, I don't think so either. So they're stuck with us, although there's a lot of great there's a lot of great Bears fans, but we do hope. So I think we're ready for this. So I'm sorry. I know if anybody's watching, this has to be distracting because I've been sitting here working the phone. We've never tried this before, but I think we have a special guest who is going to be. And Greg, listen, I wouldn't behave yourself. Okay, be respectful. We got somebody joining us. Hey, can we patch him through? How does this work, Sammy? Are we, I believe that we're speaking right now with NFL Network analyst, former #1 draft pick, a Super Bowl winner with the New York Giants. Is this David Carr?
Oh, that's a great introduction, Adam. I appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. This is me. Just cruising through California, hanging out, enjoying training camp. What's up, man?
Listen, you know that I love you and I love your family, but people have been coming after me. They've not been very happy, and I don't know if they think that I'm the fourth Carr brother or whatever it is. Obviously, I don't have the hair for it, but they keep coming after me. This week there has been a clip of you.
Good.
There's been a clip of you talking about the Bears. What's going on? You don't like the vibe of Ben Johnson? Can you explain what's been happening?
You tell me if you like the vibe. I just report the news, man. Look, here's the deal. I want every quarterback ever to be successful. And I don't know if you know this, I had a little bit of a rocky start in my career. And I am always on the lookout for situations that I deem, that make me nervous. And so all I'm doing is looking out for Caleb Williams. I do not care about, and I have coaching friends, but I do not care. Okay. I am a coach at the high school level. I don't care about my personal feelings as well. You can say whatever you need to say. I am all for the play. So my comments the other day, it was in a quick little segment where they just asked me to rank Bears. Okay. So I put them last. All right. That's fine. That's not even the point. The point is I was concerned with Ben Johnson's overall demeanor in the press conferences when he was asked about how the offense is moving, how things are going. Look, Caleb Williams is, from the very beginning, a spread quarterback. All right. I don't think what they asked him to do last year was beneficial. I don't necessarily, although I love Ben Johnson, I don't necessarily think that this is a perfect relationship. Now, it could very well be true that Caleb Williams is an excellent quarterback and Ben Johnson runs an excellent offense, but I don't think that it's necessarily just a given that those two things are going to gel just because they're so radically different. And so when I hear any type of, their offense hasn't looked great, there's some things that they're working through, I'm not surprised by that. And that's why I have the hesitation, because honestly, I believe this. If Caleb Williams went to Washington, he would have had the same rookie year that Jaden Daniels had. I really think that that's true. I don't think there would have been any difference. And I think that's where people just kind of understand the context of what's happening. I'm just not fully sold. I said the same thing with Justin Fields when he was there. Justin was a guy that played a lot like Caleb, and they tried to fit him into this West Coast offense. What happened to that offense coordinator? Gone. What happened to that head coach? Gone. I just saw him. I was in Dallas. Or at Oxnard just now. I just saw his old head coach, right, running defense for the Cowboys. So that's the only reason I get concerned. I would love it to work out. I would love for Caleb to play on time. I think that's the other thing. Like, he's never really had to play in this type of offense. On time, discipline. You know, Cliff Kingsbury was with him at SC. That coach at SC doesn't ask anybody to play on time. But Caleb's so gifted, it's like, okay, this is just such a different animal, man. This would be like if you just decided that you weren't going to wear cool shoes anymore, you know, and you showed up in some just boring old sneakers. I'd be like, who's this guy? Right? That's the reason that I'm a little concerned. But look, I'm here for guys to play good football, and I want the quarterbacks to be successful. It's just like, it's not like baseball where you can just go out, you know, all right, I'm a good batter, I'm going to hit well. There's no other factor here, really. But this isn't the same thing for quarterbacks. We have to have a lot of things go our way. We have to have a lot of the stuff that we've done in the past show up when we play in the NFL. And I got to have a guy that can put me in position. So that's where I'm just concerned, man. That's all I am. I'm just concerned for you because I want you to enjoy your time as a Bears fan. That's what I want.
Well, I'm appreciative of Adam, you know, bringing you on the show here and giving me an opportunity to ask you a couple questions. So I'll ask you 8 in a row, and we'll start with no, I'm kidding. But well, I guess based off of what you're saying there, what do you think is going to be the bigger challenge for the Chicago Bears? Is it Caleb Williams learning to play within Ben Johnson's offense and playing under center and playing play action outside of some of the things he's been used to for the most part, or Ben Johnson adjusting this prolific offense that had 70 touchdowns last year and was led by Jared Goff and trying to build something out that caters to the strengths of Caleb Williams, which has been a lot of times out of the pocket and a guy that can play with tempo and get the most out of him that way.
Yeah, exactly. So you asked the perfect question because the very first thing that you said was exactly right. My concern is that a great quarterback, who Caleb's a great quarterback. He has been his whole life. That he is not going to be able to fit into what Ben does. Now, I will say this. I've only really seen Ben, especially in the last couple of years, run the type of system that's perfect for Jared Goff. So Ben could be like a one-off brilliant guy that can just say, you know what, scrap all the stuff I did in Detroit. I'm gonna build an offense for Caleb. My only concern is, what have they done in the offseason? And all it's been is literally a template of what they did in Detroit. Like, let's bolster this offensive line. Let's create the same type of working environment. And so that tells me that they're going to do a lot of the same things they did in Detroit. So my concern is that Caleb isn't going to be able to play to the level that Ben expects a quarterback to play in his system. He's going to have all the wow stuff. You guys saw it last year. He has all those throws. He has all the extra effort ability. I'm not concerned at all about that. I'm concerned about the stuff that, quite honestly, when you hear Tom Brady talk about quarterbacks, that's all he cares about. Where's the discipline? Where are your eyes? Is the ball out of your hand on time? That's all he cares about, because that consistently wins. The extra stuff is great. You got to have that extra stuff if you're Pat Mahomes, you know, in the same mold as Caleb Williams. You got to have that. But what did Pat have? Andy Reid, who gave him structure. When does he ever get in trouble? When he gets out of the structure and he tries to do things on his own and create. He loses 2 Super Bowls badly. So it's a smaller version with what you're dealing with. You're trying to build something in Chicago. That is my concern. I think Ben's offense is great. I think I watch him. He even reinvents himself in that style every week. It's brilliant, and he did it for several years. So he's a good coach. Now, is he a leader of men? That's the other thing. Like, we don't want to get too far down the road, but a lot of teams are just hiring coordinators now. You know, these guys got to stand up in front of a room and talk to these guys and lead them. You know, a la like a Mike McDaniels, who I love. I've been with him in Houston, but like, he's shown that maybe that's not his strength. You know, even though I love the guy. I mean, is Ben able to do that? There's a lot of questions there. So, but I think the number one is, can Caleb fit into this system that they're definitely putting together in Chicago?
Well, you know, I'm here in Chicago, and I've been to, you know, a few training camps now. We'll be going back tomorrow. It sounds like there'll be pads on tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday. There was a pretty intense padded practice yesterday where there was a lot of live hitting. So, and also that coincided with Ben Johnson throwing Luther Burden out of a session for not getting lined up properly. So he's showing that he can rule with an iron fist, and I think in a way that the players can respect, but it is certainly early in the game, and when you ask like, hey, or mention like, this seems like it's the Lions offense. When he first came in, he said, this is going to be the Chicago Bears offense, not the Lions offense, where I agree with you is ever since then, he's done nothing but build this roster in what looks like would be a Lions offense. So that being said, I know it's long-winded here, but what they said the other day is Ben Johnson basically said he wants to throw the kitchen sink at Caleb Williams. And there's a lot of stuff they're working on under center. And he said Caleb's gotten a lot better with this pre-snap, responsibilities, getting in and out of the huddle quicker. And really it's about getting his eyes where they need to be post-snap on under center and play action. So that's my question to you is, coming into the league for yourself, how much of an adjustment is that? And how long did it take for you to truly feel comfortable in doing that?
Yeah, that's the hardest part. That's the what they're going to ask him to do pre-snap and like, so you think about like what he was doing in college, and I don't want to go back to that too far, but a lot of it was like from the sideline, we're going to get you into the right play. You get on the line and let's get you into the right play. From the sideline, we'll signal some stuff in, boom, we got it. And you just kind of run it. Well, I know what Ben does is a lot of what Jared did with Sean McVay in LA is they get to the line fast. That's what he's talking about. I want to get to the line, and then I need you to decipher what they're playing. And you got to get in and out of plays quick. Like we're going to have a run and a pass, and I want you to get in and out of these plays quickly, but we got to get to the line and we got to play with tempo. And then on top of that, once you snap it and you turn your back to the defense in these play action schemes, you got to know what you're seeing. So the offense that a lot of these young guys play in is they're not really asked to know what the defense is in, honestly. And I'll just tell you, like Lincoln Riley, those guys, they don't have to know what the coverage is. His offense is just built to run against everything. You just rip through progressions. Where this is a little bit different. There's specific plays, and you've probably seen trick plays. You've probably seen different formations. They try to get to very specific plays against very specific defensive looks. And so that's the processing that Caleb is going to have to understand and then kind of regurgitate. So that's the challenge. It's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for every young quarterback. That's why a lot of guys sit, a lot of guys wait and watch veteran guys do it, because it does take time to see how these guys move. You got to understand the coordinator. There's a lot goes into it. That offense that Ben runs is excellent, but you have to have a veteran quarterback or a guy that at least knows what he's seeing and can get you in and out. I have no question that Caleb can do it. It's just kind of like what you're witnessing. There's a lot coming at him right now, and he has to digest that and then regurgitate it with confidence back to his team. So it's just a matter of time, and it's tricky, man. It's not easy. So there's got to be some patience. I think that's the other thing is like, you got to understand this is as dynamic as Caleb is and as great as Ben's offenses have been. Man, I love for guys to get a chance to kind of just show that he's making. I think that's the biggest thing with you guys. Like, just as you watch him, is he progressing? Is he making the same mistakes in training camp every day? That's the thing to look for. Or is he fixing those errors? Does it look like they're playing with better tempo? That's the stuff that his physical traits are irrelevant at this point because he has plenty. It's all about the managing of the line of scrimmage in the team.
And would you say though, because you talked about how Ben looks in press conferences and everything, I think for a lot of Bears fans, it's kind of refreshing from the fact that there needs to be accountability, because it felt like there wasn't some when Matt Eberflus was the head coach. Is this just some ways that sometimes coaches need to go after players? I know that you coach, I coach, like everybody's different, but it feels like this is the way Ben Johnson reaches people. And it obviously worked out when he was in Detroit.
I think it's a great point. And then you guys also brought up the point of them kicking a guy out of practice for not doing the right assignment or not lining up correctly. I think that's fantastic. All of that stuff is great. I think that the main reason that I even said what I said was I think first of all, we're trying to rank on who's going to win the division. Let's just tamper our expectations just a little bit, because this is a kid that's trying to like learn how to ride a bike again, or walk again. Like this is a lot to go and say, no, they're just going to win the division because they have the best offense coordinator and they have a talented quarterback. Man, I wish it was that easy. It just is not. And so that's really my only hope, is that we just say, let's just understand what Caleb's dealing with. So I agree with you. You guys you make a great point with the nature of his press conferences. It's actually a good sign for me, because at least you have a guy that isn't just that coordinator head. He's a guy that can actually lead a group. He understands what accountability is. I love that he holds those guys accountable. So it's a good thing from there. It's not a great thing from saying you're going to win the division right away, but it is ultimately a good thing. I think it will be a good thing for Caleb if he can respond to it and react accordingly.
Well, I mean, I think when you look at, obviously Ben Johnson's a brilliant offensive mind, and you look at Drew Dahlman and the offensive line that they put in front of him, I think there is a healthy environment to potentially succeed. And then the final thing, I know we always are so hyper-focused on quarterback, and I know you played the position in the league, but I'm here to tell you from what I've seen so far at training camp, Colston Loveland is impressive, very impressive. And when you combine him with Cole Kmet, you'd have to think, right, that's as when you talk about security blankets, you got two of them like that, and give Ben Johnson an opportunity to have two tight ends out there that can disguise different formations and give defenses looks that I think maybe a lot of teams in the league would have trouble doing.
Well, that's what I love too. The other thing and that's a great point, because like when you look at what Ben Johnson did, obviously with Laporta in Detroit, and then you grab Loveland, because there was some debate on what tight end would be available or which one they would grab. They obviously clearly loved Loveland, and they wanted him for his specific skill set. So they're going to ask him to run block. They're going to ask him to be a gadget guy. That's the thing about Ben Johnson's offense. The tight end is involved in a lot of those, not trick plays, but like plays that look the same, but they are a little bit different, and they kind of create some big opportunities down the field. I remember watching in the last couple of years, I just played my brother's teams, and Laporta came in and he'd have like 80 yards in the first half, and you're like, but he wasn't even really defended. He was just wide open. So I think that's a really good sign that they have, that type of connection early. And if that's a guy that's making some plays, fantastic. But he's definitely going to be utilized that way. I mean, you can just pop on the Laporta tape from last year, the last couple of years, you're going to see what you guys are going to see. That's going to be their offensive system. So it kind of goes back to your point that we made earlier, is like they're building this thing to look exactly like what Detroit looked like. And like, that's awesome. Let's build that, because that offensive line's fantastic. Let's build that offensive line, protect our quarterback. It really is. I'll say this, like all Caleb really has to do is just kind of rein it in a little bit. And I don't even mean the physical ability. It's just like, it's almost like do your job. There's a grading system that quarterbacks use throughout the league and the coaches use. You can get 100% grade in your quarterback room by literally just doing your job and finding checkdowns. And in this offense, the plays are going to be there to make. You're not going to feel like you have to, like, poor Caleb, like, man, it must be terrible to be that talented, because everyone expects you to make a home run play on every snap. And I'm like, if I could just talk to him, I'd say, bro, you don't have to. You absolutely don't have to. You got a good enough coordinator. You're going to have a great offensive line. Your tight end game is going to be great. The backs, I mean, you have all the necessary tools. Just find completions. Just literally try to complete 90% of your passes. I don't care if they go for 20 yards, because at the end of the day, Ben's going to put you in position to create offense. So that would be my only piece of advice. When I'm watching him in the preseason, I'm watching for a guy that looks boring. Honestly, like, give me all the boring plays that you can. I mean, make some nice throws, obviously, but like just be as boring as possible. And that would be a great sign for me from the Chicago Bears.
I love that. Well, listen, David, I'm going to let you get back on your way. We want to thank you so much for taking some time here to answer our question. That was Greg Braggs, by the way, of CHG. I should have introduced you guys before you came on. Thanks.
Great questions.
Thank you.
He's one of the best in the business, and you do such a great job for the NFL Network. Can't wait to get on the air with you once again. Drive safe. Give the love to the family, and we'll talk soon.
I will. Thanks, buddy. See you guys.
All right. Thanks, David. There he goes. The great David Carr. Honestly, one of my favorite people at the NFL Network. When you're talking about, like, people ask me, like, hey, who's your friend? Like, Marshall Faulk was never like my friend. Like, I knew who he was. He might have recognized me. But like David Carr, I would say it's a friend. So it's tough when everybody comes after him. I'm like, I don't think that's what he meant. But what did you think about, and I thought he ended it with a perfect observation of taking the easy stuff. Don't you think that is like exactly what we want. Like, let's take we'll take 30 easy throws a game, and then when we need something spectacular, it's still in his arsenal.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, like I said in one of my questions, that's exactly what Ben Johnson said a few days ago. He said, It's about getting Caleb's eyes where they need to be. And so he's talking about that, first read and understanding where he needs to be looking from a coverage standpoint. And so, yes, I mean, you saw a play during padded practices where, I have to be careful about formations and coverages and things they're looking at, because we're not supposed to share those things as media, but they did share a video on the Bears Twitter account and Instagram where they showed a check down to DeAndre Swift. And that wasn't like I mean, that was part of the design of the play, but I wouldn't necessarily say it had to go to, like, maybe in last year that Caleb's eyes still would have been downfield, but he saw what was in front of him and understood that where the linebackers were and where everybody's eyes were defensively, that I'm going to check it down quickly to DeAndre Swift and let him get me 15 yards. And that's exactly what happened on that play. I highlighted it on Twitter this morning because we have to celebrate the simple, and everybody wants the jump man Jordan type throw down the sideline over the top to DeAndre Swift last year. That was an unbelievable play that Caleb Williams made. But I think what really needs to start being the unbelievable play is that consistency of hitting those stuff like, David Carr talked about. Jared Goff at one point last year going 18 for 18 in a game, right? Well, those weren't all, just magnificent, touchdown 50-yard bombs. They were efficiency and understanding where the defense was at. So that's going to be where Caleb Williams, when he talks about reining it in, I think that's what he means. And I completely agree, but it is about finding that balance, right? And because Caleb Williams is a playmaker and you don't want to take what makes him special away from him, but that's where I think they're trying to build this whole thing. Throw the kitchen sink at him, see what he can handle, and then build it out from there.
No, I absolutely agree with all of that. And by the way, great stuff from David Carr. Great questions, by the way, too.
Thank you. I know the one was a little long-winded, but the reason I wanted to add some context is, I know, I don't know if Shane and Phil are going to do their Keeping It 100 tonight. And I saw Shane do Shane's tweet, kind of going at David Carr about it. I hadn't had an opportunity to see the take until Shane shared it. And so it was cool. I didn't know you were going to bring him on, but I think the one thing that makes it hard,
surprise.
Yeah, well, it was awesome. That was great. And but I will say, I think the one thing that makes it hard for national pundits is that they're not there. They don't follow, us Bears fans. We are losing our mind over every little piece of information that comes out of Hallis Hall. Yeah. And we have to learn to understand and have a good perspective on those little details. But at the same time, it's the opposite for the national pundits, where they aren't really privy to any of this information. Like he didn't know that Luther Burden, got pulled out of a series yesterday for making a mistake. He hasn't heard how, during mini camps that Ben Johnson was hollering at Cole Kmet. He didn't hear on the first day of camp when, just 7 days ago, where he pulled the first team off for not getting lined up properly 2 times. And I can't blame him for that. He's covering 32 teams. So to cover and understand the nuance of 7 days of practice for 32 teams is simply impossible. So, that's where, for me, I understand, trying to give these context to these guys. And so that when they go out there, they'll have more of a puncher's chance of giving the take that the local fan base is looking for. Takes time. They got to see these guys on TV. They got to watch a few preseason games come through, and then the information seems to be a little more available. But right now we're kind of we're the ones that, are in a position of strength, at least the local people that get to go to camp, and guys like Poles as him in the camp. They honestly, they know more than even some of the guys, because they're seeing it every day. And so that's what makes all of this fun and the conversation a lot of fun. So it was really cool to talk to him.
No, it's great. And it's great insight too. And I I obviously don't think that there's anything nefarious. Like, he's not trying to stir anything up. He's just, asked a question. He gives it. And it's good to get a read from the national people as well, because sometimes, especially me, I think I'm the one who's probably the worst of this, is like, nope, we're great. We're already going to be getting stuff like that. So sometimes I need to be checked, and I don't mind it. I do. And I didn't want to he did kind of go, like, when we were asking questions, it kind of goes back to whenever somebody's talking about, like, well, you're doing a lot of stuff that Detroit did by building a great offensive line. Like, so should we not have a good offensive line? Like, well, we don't want to be like Detroit, because Detroit had a good offensive line. So we're going to do it by having a crappy offensive. No, like, and you want good players. So I still understand what he's talking about. And I think that if it gives you an opportunity to kind of vary yourself from that, it's kind of like, when you build a golf bag, it's like, okay, we've got driver and 3-wood and all that stuff, but you can use them in different ways that suit your skills better. And hopefully it results in winning a divisional crown. And speaking of crowns, you can win your fantasy league, or you can own it. Too many fantasy champs walk away with a plastic trophy, some ungodly belt, but no, this is Crowned Champs, baby. Custom championship crowns, rings, scepters, robes. You don't just win, you rule your league. And sure, your buddy's hosting the draft at Applebee's again. Meanwhile, Crown Champs is throwing draft parties on party buses, rooftops, even freaking yachts. Yeah, fantasy football just got royal. Sign up for the Hall of Champions subscription. Designer level gear starting at just $2.99 a month. That's less than your league mates spend crying in their chicken tenders. Don't play like a peasant. Get crowned like a champ. Hit up crownchamps.com. That's crownchamps.com, and tell them Adam Rank sent you. Promo code RANK15 and save 15%. You won't be disappointed if you do. Go all out, especially for your fantasy drafts. It's a once in a year. Like, I'm sitting here, I'm upset that Southwest isn't giving me a good deal to fly to Vegas, but it's like, it's once a year, people. Like, spend out. Crown Champs is the way to go. We had so much stuff I wanted to sit here and cover. A couple of things I do want to throw out there. Number one, as I'm covering my mic, the Bears are going to honor Virginia McCaskey this season. They are going to have a patch on their uniform. They will not be doing a throwback. Our friends at Windy City Sports Cards put this out today, this attractive patch. The George S. Hallis has been a part of the Bears uniform for quite some time. It's nice to see Virginia get her moment in the sun. And in addition to that, there will be a helmet decal for Steve Mongo McMichael, the 76. A couple of tough losses here for the Bears, but still going to be honoring them for a team that is steeped in tradition. That means no throwback uniforms, Greg. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not going to get my white on white jerseys, then you know what? Then nobody gets anything.
Right.
And I get it. Virginia didn't like the throwbacks, and I kind of appreciate that about her, how much she was invested in that kind of detail, how they look. Because that's how strongly I feel about bringing back the white on whites.
Yes.
It's those kind of battles are the truly passionate ones. So that just, I think, speaks to her passion. You may or may not agree with not having the alternates because you like them or don't. Well, she didn't, and she was so passionate that's how strongly she felt. And George, who always did a great job of honoring her mom, is going to do that by making sure this is what gets done. And then, like you said, Maddie, when you talked about this at the top, Maddie at camp today, asking the hard hitting, because that's elite. When I tell you that's elite training camp content, that is right there. It's easy to be, do what I did and go out there and, put all the videos of the highlights. We all love the highlights, and they certainly help, with coverage, because when you try to tell Carm that a pass interference would have been a catch and he argues with you, there's kids out there that will give you the proof. But Maddie out there hitting the hard-hitting questions right to George.
Right.
George is not playing the honey bear. That'll never happen. But I love that she was brave enough to ask, and now everyone has their answer.
I thought it was charming. I thought that both of them came off as very charming. Like, I know people are like, he looked annoyed. Like, George always looks annoyed, but like, whatever. He's fine.
No, he likes to mess with you with a little, give you a little spice. Like, if you've ever met him in person and you do go off the cuff a little bit with him, he's gonna poke back. And so he's great about that. He's great about interacting with the fans at Hallis Hall. He stands out at the entry point of where the fans come into training camp, and he greets every single person that comes up to him. So, he makes himself fully available. And I've seen him many a times walking through South Lot of Soldier Field, which I've always said, it's one thing to greet fans at training camp on your own premises at Hallis Hall. It's another thing to go into the Lions Den in South Lot where there's been a lot of drinking and, a lot of fans that might be a little unruly and upset about, said season. And he still goes out there and he'll face the fans. And I'm sure he's had a few times where people have questioned about this, that, and the other from a success of franchise, perspective. So he's not afraid to get in there and talk to you face to face. I'll always give him that credit.
No, yeah, he does a great job of that. And walking into South Lot with people who've been drinking since 6 a.m, an interesting choice. And I'm glad though that he's out there having a good time. It's fun. I do love that kind of training camp content as well. Okay, so David Carr was talking a little bit about the press conference game and all that stuff. And I thought, listen, he's got an outside perspective. I do have a comment here from DJ Moore, and he was talking with the Bleacher Report, talking about Ben Johnson changing the culture. Sammy, if we could bring up that sound, please.
Team here in town for you, change of scenery with the crew in here. How's it felt so far through the early portion of training camp with Ben Johnson?
Uncomfortable has been the main thing. Just them trying to change the culture around here, and they did it fast, and you can tell how we practice and go about our business.
What about it has changed so much in terms of how you practice? What's the thing that jumped out to you right away?
The intensity. If you mess up, you get out of there. You get one chance. If you a double offender, then you ain't gonna be in on that play for the rest of camp. It feel like.
So we saw a lot of that in the chat. People mentioning Luther Burden in there. Rookie receiver coming in, had been dealing with a little bit of injury, and Coach Johnson after a play tossed him out and made it watch there. Did you offer any counsel to your rook on that one? What'd you tell him after that?
I actually didn't see it because I was coming back or getting talked to, but I did hear him yelling at somebody, and I didn't know it with Luther. But any advice is that you just got to stay in your playbook and know the exact details, because if the playbook say +2 from the hash and you -1 from the hash, then you're wrong and you're going to have to get out. If he going to give you a second chance, you're going to re-huddle it, go back out there. If you do it again, line up in the same way, you're definitely coming out.
You're obviously out there at training camp, and you've seen you saw all of Matt Eberflus's training camps. Has there been a discernible difference when you watch the Bears this season?
Yeah, absolutely. No question. I said it all during last year. I know there'll be some people like, well, why didn't you red flag last year? You hyped them up. Go back and watch our training camp episodes last year at CHGO. I was quick to point out in a 2-hour practice, it would take an hour and 20 minutes before they'd actually get into any kind of significant drills, whether it was 1-on-1, 7-on-7, or 11-on-11s. It was taking far too long. And I've been going to training camp for 25 years since they started going to Bourbonnais. And it was unlike anything I had seen in terms of dialing things back from pushing them to work harder. I mean, I did a show with Briggs and Azuma last week where Lance Briggs said they had a 26-day stretch where they had 2-a-days. Obviously, those days aren't ever coming back, and we can accept that. But yesterday, during that live padded practice where they had more than a couple sessions where there was physical, intense, live hitting, unlike you're used to seeing this early in camp, certainly in the new era of football, it was such a breath of fresh air for me. It brought me back to those days in Bourbonnais with Lovie Smith and that defense with, Lance Briggs and Brian Urlacher and Peanut Tillman and the good offensive lines the Bears had back then. They were fighting yesterday. Jervon Dexter setting the tone early with a hit up the middle. Chris Williams completely decking Kyle Monungai as Kyle popped through the hole. You had TJ Edwards covering DeAndre Swift on the outside. getting a tackle for loss behind the line of scrimmage, physical tackling. And then at one point at the end of practice, there was a safety on the third team that where a guy came across the middle and just jacked the wide receiver as he caught it. And it was like a you got jacked up moment, the old days of football. And honestly, I think a flag would have been called if it was in the game. And so that's where you got to have that balance, because at that point we're like, okay, everyone chill out. But at the same time, when you talk about who Ben Johnson is going to be as a coach, and David Carr had those questions because he hasn't seen it yet, I thought that was the first moment where I saw a little bit of that Dan Campbell DNA come out in him. I don't know if we'll never know, but I don't know if Ben Johnson would have been going as hard for his team in that moment had he not had the experience he's had over the last 3 years. Because when you look at the Lions and the physicality and the presence they have week in and week out, that was instilled in training camp. You saw a little peek behind the curtain when the Lions were on Hard Knocks. So to see Ben Johnson come here and set the tone like he did yesterday excites me as a Bears fan.
That was one of the more admirable things about the Lions, is that Dan Campbell obviously changed the culture, changed the way that you perceive the Detroit Lions, but you have these technicians, and it's not just Ben Johnson. It's everybody on that staff, JT and
JT Barrett.
JT Barrett. Yep. And I think Tanner, the guy who went to the Jets, Tanner I'm spacing. But in any event, like, they had great coordinators and bright football minds. And I'm not saying that the Lions don't have bright guys coming in now, but Dan Campbell, when you're the head coach, a lot of times you need to be the tone center. This is what our team is all about, what you're getting after. And that's exactly what they were able to do. So having Ben Johnson being able to kind of establish that a little bit with the Chicago Bears has given me a lot of hope. And I really love that part of it. Speaking of getting after it, where is your next game day spot going to be? Listen, if you are a real Chicago sports fan, and I'm talking Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox, you need to be watching the games at Twisted Shamrock, the place for live games on game day. They've got monster TVs in their private party room, main bar, and outside their stellar patio, rowdy fans, bucket specials, and all your favorites, the old-fashioned. Oh, swing by Twisted Shamrock, where Chicago sports come together. I'm telling you, when I get off that plane at Midway, the first stop is the Twisted Shamrock. Go check it out. You will not be disappointed. So happy. This is the first time that I'm doing a read for them. Super excited to have them on board. So thank you, everybody at the Twisted Shamrock. We look forward to a great relationship, and we look forward to a great spot to go out there and watch some Chicago sports. We're talking about, do we have any questions though? We do have some.
Tanner Engstrand.
Gosh, I keep getting his last name, but Tanner Engstrand did a nice job. Tanner Engstrand, to me, is one of those guys that could end up being a hot name on the on the head coaching cycle. If the Jets are good, and I don't know, I want the Jets to be good. I want Justin Fields to be good, but I don't want everybody. I don't want the Civil War to start back up. So let's go. So Windy City Twins brought up this question right around 7:18. Is Ben Johnson not building the offense based on Caleb's skill set? And I think this is something that David was talking about a little bit. I really do believe, and Greg brought it up to David, which is obviously it is. And I think, again, there are certain things that should be like when you build a car, you have 4 tires, you have doors, a windshield. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of similarities, but then it gets different when you have a Ferrari or a Corolla. Some things might be a little bit different. I ultimately believe that this is going to be Caleb Williams' offense, and that Ben Johnson understands what's going on, and he knows that I don't think that he's oblivious to the fact that he's walking into this situation and what Caleb Williams is all about. Is that something that even concerns you?
No, I'm just curious to see how it plays itself out. So they're throwing the kitchen sink at Caleb Williams right now, and you've heard Caleb and Ben talk about it. They even had a session a few days ago where if you're a spectator, you're like, wow, these are some massive offensive line breakdowns where Montez Sweat is immediately getting in the backfield and blowing up the play. Well, little did we all know, and they revealed it after practice, and we appreciate the Bears with their, openness to share this, but they said, well, that was a heated up session where they purposely let the defensive line through to speed up Caleb Williams' clock to see how he reacted to those things. And so when you talk about, throwing the kitchen sink at him, it's not just within what he has to learn from a playbook perspective. It's how fast he can react to those things once you have to implement them on the field. So now what do I think? Sure, you want to try. Who wouldn't want to keep doing what they were doing in Detroit? They scored 70 touchdowns last year, but obviously it is going to look different. So you throw the kitchen sink at Caleb Williams. At least I think this is the formula. Then when you get to the regular season and you have an understanding of what he can do and what he can't do, I believe Ben Johnson is smart enough to implement a game plan that's going to get the most out of Caleb Williams and the offense. And that's why we're paying him $13 million a year. At least that's why the Bears are. And so I have confidence in that because based off of why, when you played that DJ Moore clip, this isn't just talk right now. This is talk and backing it up where DJ Moore said, hey, we're getting uncomfortable out there because we have to be ready for our P's and Q's. Well, what did Ben Johnson say in his opening press conference? Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And when we talked to David Carr earlier and he said, go pull the Sam Laporta tape up the last couple of years. And he said, making things look the same but different. What did Ben Johnson say at his opening press conference? He said, I want to make the same things look different and different things look the same. And so there's a coach right there that the rhetoric matches what the actual implementation of it is. It's not just talk. And so that is what excites me and at least gives me some encouragement that this is actually something that will happen and not just something that is off-season training camp hype that we've done year in and year out as Bears fans.
Yeah, it feels like one of the first times where it's actually warranted. And again, I know that I keep bringing up this point, but how often have we been going through coaching searches or coaching things where we're like, oh, the guy that we all really wanted doesn't get hired by us, Bruce Arians being the chief among them. This is one of the few times where you're like, yeah, we actually got a guy to be excited about. Somebody that the entire league was in concert saying, this is the guy. This is the guy who's going to be the most sought after coach. Tom Brady tried to get him to the Las Vegas Raiders. Other teams were trying to hire this guy. The Lions fans were hoping he was not going to Chicago, and we got him. So we got to go out there and let this play out. Bear 51 asked this question. Why is it that the national media doesn't give the Bears any credit, but the local media says they're progressing and Caleb is looking better every day? Well, Greg pointed this out. And this is no disrespect to David, and we talked about this. David is driving home right now to Bakersfield. Greg drove home from Bears camp today, and that's not a knock. David's job is to cover the NFL, to give his insight as a former NFL quarterback. We don't know what it's like to be under center in an NFL game. And okay, so we'll never try to offer that perspective. Greg is there at practice every day and can tell you what he sees. And I think that's the biggest thing. And we can't be upset about it. We can't like fly off the handle at these guys.
We have to be able to combine both sets of information. I don't know more about the game than David Carr, but David Carr doesn't know what has been happening at training camp for the last week. So you try to combine those things. And, when I'm giving my opinion on what I've seen at camp, I never played it down in my life, but does that mean I can't talk about football? No, I've been going to training camp for 25 years. I've said a million times, you know it when you see it because you've seen enough different players to try to compare. When you talk about Zacchaeus, they call him Oz coming out from Washington. He looks just like Earl Bennett to me. Why? I can't explain why I would say something like that other than the fact that I watched Earl Bennett at training camp for years. I watched the way he played the game. I watched his mannerisms. I saw his practice techniques. And so now you see this guy come in and like, whoa, he looks very similar, and so that's kind of a fan way of trying to break things down. David Carr understands the game at a much higher level, and that should be respected. But at the same time, we're having this information, where we're able to see these things, and they have had progress the last few days. Friday, when the Bears and Caleb Williams had a meltdown practice last Friday, where Caleb threw multiple interceptions and a really bad one in 7-on-7, that made national news. Colin Coward's talking about it, that all these different, it becomes like breaking news in the midday shows, right? But then Caleb Williams bounces back on Saturday. There is no national shows on Saturdays to break down Caleb Williams' bounce back day.
Well, it was back to football Saturday.
Right. So now, they've stacked a few days in a row. Today was a light practice. I don't think there was much to take from it, but this is a process, guys. And, how much credit we get from the national pundits. I just think as a fan base, I think we're better off being done with this stuff. Like, who cares what anybody says? Me, we've talked about this all off season, Adam. I've been in this no hype mode. I think the team needs to prove it. And I've, as we've gone through training camp, I think I've done a pretty good job of trying to hold to my word a little bit here. I'm certainly excited and encouraged from what we've seen so far, but at the end of the day, they got to prove it. It's so, and we're hearing this from the team. Like, they're not hyping anything up. They're dialed into the details. And, if they need, a bunch of flowers thrown at them, or if the media coverage is too tough on the players and they can't handle it, well, then guess what? They aren't the players we're looking for that are going to win you a championship. Because ultimately, as much as it is my job to be a talking head 6 days a week, none of what we say matters. What they do out there as a team does. And so if they're distracted or affected by any of that stuff on the outside, whether it's me or David Carr or Kurt Warner or whoever talking about it, then they aren't the right team for the job. And so I'm not worried about what's being said. We can all have our fun. We can all have our opinions. And then when it comes down to week 1, we'll find out exactly what this team is made of.
If anything, David Carr is saying what you were saying in the offseason about, like, hey, don't get too hyped too fast. But when it's somebody from the outside, you're like, screw you, I'll do whatever I want. Like, I'm this guy, he's in the Hall of Fame already, which is just kind of funny, which is, again, I think David's on board with it. Listen, David's a wonderful person. And he said it, he was going overboard about, like, he loves Caleb Williams. He wants him to be successful. He's not rooting against him. He doesn't hate the Bears. There might be some people. James Jones, another friend of mine, hates the Bears. David Carr does not. And he's just asking us,
well, you can tell James Jones that Al Harris is on our side now.
You know what? I might surprise you next week and just have James Jones join us.
Yes.
As I threw that, well, I didn't want to jinx it too, by the way, because I'm like, I think David will come on, and I'm like texting, like I was. If you watch,
we put it in the notes, but then they weren't in the finalized notes, so then I wasn't expecting it. But that was a pleasant surprise to have an opportunity to try to talk to. I mean, he knows, man. He was a first round. He's the number 1 pick in the draft. He had his ups and downs, and obviously has a good perspective. And I think that you can draw from those things. The Bears brought in Case Keenum, came out of Houston in an air raid offense. And, that's what's important, is those kind of guys to offer a perspective to Caleb Williams that will help him learn from the success and failures of quarterbacks before him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on. And I appreciate the outside perspective, and I appreciate what you're saying. But okay, I'm gonna go fan the way that I'm gonna fan. I do want to get to Scottish Bears question though, because he's asking about the running back situation. I find it hilarious that, again, I get this from the fantasy football perspective. So I love DeAndre Swift, and I think I put out a fantasy video where I was like, DeAndre Swift is going to be on my right. He's going to feed families, whatever. Be like, what about Roschon Johnson? This again is like the outside perspective. What about Roschon Johnson's not him. Kyle Monangai, though, you've been there. I know you mentioned a moment ago, you talked about him getting lit up in practice. What have you seen out of Kyle Monangai in practice? Are we saying it right? Are we saying Monangai correct? Because Phil and Shane had a different, like, it was driving me crazy. By the way, Monday nights, CHGO After Dark, the three families have come together, the Tape Never Lies Network. Phil and Shane have a different pronunciation than Greg and I when it comes to Monangai. But what have we seen out of him so far in camp?
Well, I as I said, with the live, practice yesterday and the pads on, that was the first time you could really get a sense of what the run game could potentially be. And when you talk about the run game, or even when you talk about the quarterback, I think sometimes left out of the discussion is the offensive line. And your run game is only as good as your offensive line. And when you watched during those live sessions, the holes they were creating for all three running backs who all got reps with the first team, they were getting yards. And will Kyle Monangai be a guy that, gets, 25-yard pop-offs like Saquon Barkley, every fourth carry? Probably not. But can he get you 4 yards in a cloud of dust consistently and get you on third and short? Yeah, I think he absolutely could be that guy. And when you watch him walk around the practice field, he's not tall. He's not like this huge mountain of a quarterback, or running back, I should say. He's not Derrick Henry, but his legs are as big as Derrick Henry's. This dude, when you talk about he's a low center of gravity type of running back, you see why. His legs are like tree trunks. And so I have to imagine that's part of the reason why it's really hard to take this guy down. And you saw the highlights from him out of Rutgers. And so I think he looks the part. But again, we got to see it. Let's see. I have a feeling a week from Friday, or a week from Sunday, I should say, when the Bears take on the Dolphins, I think you're going to see Kyle Monangai be one of those standouts of that preseason game, because I have to imagine he's going to get a lot of reps.
He's going to get a lot of reps. And that's one of the things that's so tough with doing the fantasy football stuff, is that we can't allow a lot of this to play out because our drafts are happening right now. So I got to come out and be like, next David Montgomery, boom, stamp it, put my name on it. And if it doesn't work out, fantasy receipts comes for me, which is fine, which is the job. But I'm excited to see what Kyle Monangai is going to be able to do. And speaking of Shane Marsaw, he chimed in here. So one of the discussions we had on CHGO After Dark was, which of the left tackle candidates are we rooting for the most? I am a big Braxton Jones guy. You were talking about Ozzie Trapillo. What have you seen so far? I know that when you see Ozzie physically, looks the part. Oh, he's a mountain of a man. What have we seen out of this left tackle situation over the last couple of days?
Well, I'd see Shane and our good friend having some fun at my expense for my Ozzie Trapillo agenda that I've started early on since the draft has occurred. But what I've seen from him, getting his reps at left tackle, he was out there with the first team today. Braxton Jones had a day off. And then obviously yesterday, they were splitting reps between Braxton Jones, Ozzie Trapillo, and Karan Amagaji. Well, number one, the first thing you see, just like with Monangai and stature-wise, this guy, Ozzie Trapillo, is a mountain. He is huge. He's the biggest dude on the field. It's not even close. And then he's wearing that 75. It gives you those Kyle Long vibes, and maybe that's the low-hanging fruit because it's just it's the easiest comp you can make. But at the same time, you do see the physicality. I was watching him in particular going up against the new defensive end, Dayo Odangbo. More than a few times, those guys were going back and forth at each other, and Ozzie Trapillo was completely stonewalling him. And maybe Dayo Odangbo needs to have a counter move because it felt like he just kept trying to bull rush right into him.
Right.
And that didn't work at all. But you saw the physicality. And then at one point, I think maybe it was Austin Booker on the edge. You saw a spin where, Austin likes to do that spin move and try to get around the edge of Ozzie Trapillo. I thought he did a really good job of moving his feet and keeping him out there and keeping that leverage and creating a lane for Caleb Williams to step up into the pocket. And so, it's only a handful of practices here so far. Half of them, they've been very light practices and short practices. So you can't have any grandiose takeaways. But when you talk about a guy looking the part, he certainly does. And then when you combine that with what you've heard from guys like Joe Thuney and Ben Johnson and others, it sounds like this guy is really dialed into his responsibilities in the film room and his responsibilities in the playbook. And so I'm excited for him. They drafted him in the second round for a reason, as Shane has said many times. And so I would right now, personally, with as many first team reps and the guy that has been the first guy out with the first team reps more than a few times, including in yesterday's live padded practice, I would say right now he's the front runner. And Ben Johnson alluded to that they need to make this decision quick, sooner rather than later, in order to build continuity among that offensive line as they head towards, the first week of the season. Jonah Jackson now is going to be day-to-day with an injury. At least that was reported today. So, that's,
Yeah, we have a question about that. How serious is it? Have you seen?
I don't know. I mean, I can't tell. He said day-to-day. So based off of what they said, it shouldn't be that serious, but it's just something we're going to have to monitor. I can't tell you with confidence because I'm not in the medical room with them. But he said day-to-day, so that's encouraging, but disappointing that he's going to miss some practices, including tomorrow, where they're going to be in pads.
Yeah, day-to-day is always better than we won't see him till week 1. So
right.
Always think that.
Like Justin Jefferson for the Vikings, they said we're not going to see him again. So I've been looking ahead to week 1 so much I can't wait. And, J.J. McCarthy, a rookie quarterback coming to Chicago, that's going to be a tough one. And to not be able to build chemistry with Justin Jefferson all the way up until that point, that's advantage for the Bears. You don't root for those things because karma can come back to haunt you on your own team, but it's certainly notable when you talk about that first week matchup.
I don't think you need to build confidence and chemistry with Justin Jefferson. Just throw him the football. I think it's
he's wide open 50 yards downfield.
It's not Jordan Addison, and that's no shot at Jordan Addison, but Justin Jefferson is such a different human being. But still, I did want to point out something that Scottish Bear brought up too about Ben Johnson. And again, as everybody talks about this, about because I've heard that we had Mike Garafolo on when Ben Johnson was first hired. We've had David on talking about it today. I don't know if this not Ben Johnson chose this. It's not like Ben Johnson knows what he's getting into, and I think that's a big thing that is fair to point out to people. It's not like Ben Johnson got saddled with this quarterback. It's not like a situation where it's like Ben Johnson was in the draft room screaming for Drake May, and you got Caleb Williams. He knew exactly who he was getting getting into. Do you mind? Can we do one more question? Actually, that was for Greg. Any players y'all think will start at the end of the year, but not week 1? A question from Kyle. Is there anybody who you think by the end of the year will be like, oh my gosh, this guy's great?
Well, I mean, I think one of the guys that we need to look at right now, based off of what Dennis Allen had to say at the press conference today, and it's only press conference talk, but I would say Tyreek Stevenson is certainly somebody that we have to keep an eye on here because Nashawn Wright has been getting first team reps with Jalen Johnson out. And so far the secondary has held their own. And I only base that off that take off of the fact that we haven't seen very many big plays from the offense. There hasn't been very many downfield throws. You did see one a couple days ago where Caleb dropped it in the bucket 45 yards downfield to DJ Moore, and the only thing Kyler Gordon could do to stop that play was to drag DJ Moore down before the pass fell to, into DJ's hands for a pass interference. Outside of that, we haven't seen any kind of explosiveness, and I know that's one of the key words that Ben Johnson used, in terms of what his offense needs to be. You can be explosive on short, quick game for sure, but I'm pretty sure that explosiveness also, coincides with some of those deeper passes, and we saw plenty of those with Detroit. So the fact that we haven't seen those, and Dennis Allen talking about how sticky was the word he used, these corners have been, and Jalen Johnson isn't one of those corners. That's, I mean, you can look at this both sides of the coin. That makes me a little nervous about the wide receivers head. You guys should be able to get off these dudes. Right. You guys are Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Olamide Zaccheaus. Like, come on, like, let's get open, guys. But at the same time, let's credit the secondary. You know, as Pina Tillman once yelled at a training camp at Bourbonnais to the fans who constantly root for the offense, Pina Tillman yelled, the defense plays for this team too. Yeah. And so, you know, Nahshon Wright, I think, is making an impression. And Nahshon Wright is somebody that's had a history with Al Harris back in Dallas. And so, you know, if Tyreek Stevenson doesn't stay on his toes here and they feel like they can trust Nahshon Wright from what they've seen so far in camp, maybe that's the name. Maybe that's the name. I think that's something that everybody should be looking out for.
Yeah, that's a player that I really like. And it's funny because in some respects, you're like, well, he will get a chance if somebody gets injured, but it's the NFL. Like, people are going to get injured and people get an opportunity. So you just hope that when your number is called, you step up and you meet the challenge. And I think Nahshon Wright is certainly one of those guys who could do that. Another name you guys should be looking out for too. And this will just be between us. And I talked about it on the Monday Fantasy Show, but Colston Loveland is pretty good. But no, I'm joking around about that. But Colston Loveland, I don't think that week one, again, who knows? Like, watch him catch 2 touchdowns in week 1. I don't want to take anything away or even try to temper expectations as much as I have already. But again, somebody who, again, I'm using this as a fantasy launching point. Like, I'm not drafting as my tight end 1, but I'm making sure I'm leaving my fantasy draft with him. I'll just put it that way. Before we wrap up tonight, sorry, I know I've kept you over a little bit longer, but I did want to go over this because this will be my first opportunity to talk about it on this show. Not necessarily a Bears thing, but a big thing in the world of sports for the Chicago Bears. Can we cue up Ben Johnson talking about Ryne Sandberg?
Just want to take a second as we get going here just to acknowledge the passing of Ryne Sandberg. You know that I grew up a big Cubs fan, and so he was a big part of my childhood, my family. We watched him, Mark Grace, the whole crew on WGN for a number of years, and I know what he means to the city and the career that he had. So just thoughts and prayers to his family, and then also the tragedy there in New York with the NFL, the shooter, and so thoughts and prayers go out to the employee that got shot. Keeps things in perspective, you know, as we enter training camp and the guys are going hard, that a little bit more to life than just football. So, and
further on for Ryne Sandberg, for somebody who, as you all know, I was born in the greater Chicagoland area, spent most of my time growing up in Southern California, but Ryne Sandberg was still a huge part of my childhood because of WGN. And even though we didn't have cable, my neighbors next door did, the Zeller family, and we would all our days, I swear, like every summer day, because where I grew up, it was hot as all get out back when there was smog in the air, and we would play right until around 11:30, where the Cubs games would start, because this was back in the day when the Cubs home games, every home game was a day game, and we would go and we'd watch Ryne Sandberg and those great Cubs teams of the 1980s. I remember my parents going down in 1984 down to San Diego to watch the NLCS, and that not turning out the way that they wanted it to. And of course, everything that happened in 1989. But Ryne Sandberg, I think just beyond Chicago, the Cubs truly are America's baseball team. And they were, especially during that era. So it's tough. And I know as you, growing up as Cubs fan, what did Ryne Sandberg mean to you?
Well, you know, obviously Rhino was somebody that, you know, for a lot of Cubs fans, you know, embodied what it, you know, that I always kind of reference it as the golden era of Chicago sports. And when you look at 1984 to 1994, let's just use that 10-year window. You had the Cubs win the division for the first time since 1945, and Rhino doing everything he did in that year. And then the 85 Bears that captivated the world, right? And Michael Jordan gets drafted by the Bulls, and Walter Payton is still the king of the city. And so you had your Mount Rushmore, right? And then you mentioned the 89 Cubs, the Blackhawks go to a Stanley Cup in 92. The Bulls win 3 NBA championships. And so Rhino was of that Mount Rushmore, right? And it was Chelios and Rhino and Jordan and Walter, right? And for me, as the Chicago sports fanatic that I am today, he's just as big of a part of that. I'm more of the generation of Sammy Sosa, but from 98, early, mid to late 90s as Sammy started to captivate the world. But Rhino certainly had a big impact on, the Cubs fan that I am today. And I also, always say that number 23 in Chicago is special. And I only think the greats should be allowed to wear it. I don't think you should be giving out the number 23 frivolously in this city. And you had Ryne Sandberg, Michael Jordan, Devin Hester, you had some of the greats of all time wearing that number. And he obviously is somebody that, when you talk about the Ryne Sandberg game, like that's a 2-homer game in the regular season that they still reference as the Ryne Sandberg game. Bob Costas was on the call. He talked about it on Marquee Network the other night when his passing was announced. And that, I think, kind of goes to show you the lore of Ryne Sandberg. He, the talk about this, making the simple electric, like we were talking about earlier. That's what he did. He made the simple day in and day out consistency something that was Hall of Fame worthy. And so that should be something that is applauded and remembered forever for Rhino. And it's obviously sad to lose a guy at the age of 65. And, while I didn't get to see or, have, all these fond memories of his playing career being a lot younger back then, having been around him at Cubs conventions for the last 10 to 15 years and seeing his interaction with fan, you wouldn't have known he was a Hall of Famer hanging out with the people. He never, hid while the mass of fans was, coming at him. He took it in stride. He'd be walking around Cubs convention just like anybody else. And a lot of these guys, they'll run through the back door, they're not trying to get, hounded by the herds of Cubs fans. And there's a lot of passionate ones out there. No, he stood right there with you. And so that, I think, spoke to just how nice of a guy he was. And that's the stories you've heard time and again from everybody that was closer and around him.
Yeah, a real one for sure. I always sometimes forget how young you are. It wasn't necessarily, you were a Sosa guy. I get that. But still somebody that you can appreciate, similar to like when I was growing up, Jerry West was the general manager of the Lakers, but you didn't revere him, but you knew him, like you still loved him, even though you didn't see him play. And I know that Ryne Sandberg had this similar thing to the point of like, I really, if I was the Blackhawks I don't know why I'm throwing the Blackhawks out there, or if I was DePaul or anybody, anything, like if I was running a Chicago sports team, I would not give out 23. I wouldn't necessarily retire it, but because of Jordan and Hester and Rhino, I just wouldn't give it out. Like I always, whatever, this is the dumbest thing, but I'm going to say it. When I would play the NCAA football game, I would never let, regardless of the school, even if I was if I was like the coach of USC or like if I have Boston College or whatever, I wouldn't let anybody wear 42 because I think that number should just be retired. It was Pat Tillman's number, like just retired amongst all, like that. We're never giving that out. And I think in Chicago, 23 should have the same sort of gravitas. So I don't know if there's been a great, forgive me, I can't think of a great number 23 for the Blackhawks. But if I was the Blackhawks, I would low key retire 23 and be like, yeah, nobody's going to get that. And I wouldn't even make it a thing. I wouldn't hang a banner or anything. I'd just be like, nobody's getting 23 because it's too special in the world of Chicago sports. But tremendous loss. And, and appreciate everybody for all the great tributes we've seen over the last couple of days. Really nice for everybody just to kind of come together to pay respects to the great Ryne Sandberg. And so, Greg, that is going to do it for us here this evening. Sorry I kept you on way too long.
Oh, no, you're fine. Having fun, man. Now, hey, there's no way too long this time of year. One thing in the summertime, if me or you are holding each other up from our 18 holes of golf we're trying to play, that's one thing. We actually have tangible football things to talk about now. I could go 4 hours doing this because there's substance finally, and we wait for this stuff for 7 months. and the regular season goes by so fast. So I'm not going to forget this quickly, a week and a half into training camp, that it was 2 weeks ago that I was literally crying.
Right.
We're doing filler episodes and trying to grasp at the smallest straws to give people what they yearn for. And that's, football conversation and Bears talk.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Like you would normally think like the dead period, like we should go out and rejoice in. And I loved it. And I just keep loving talking about the Bears and everything that's been going on. And I'm super excited for everything that's going on. And I'm excited for everybody here who joined us here this evening. We will be back next week. By the way, for those of you who are unaware, we do not Greg, but me, do a Monday night show where we do a lot of your fantasy questions and try to get you ready for your drafts upcoming. We'll have some special episodes. If David Carr wouldn't have been able to work out this week, we would have brought him in later, but we're cool. So at the very least, Fantasy Isle will return on Monday. Until that time, catch us also. And by the way, Fantasy Isle comes on before the After Dark. So we'll be back for CHGO After Dark on Monday as well. So until that time, for Greg Braggs, I'm Adam Rank, bear down, and Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.